through their entrepreneurial journeys and to also hear a little bit about their vision for where they see the future of food and beverage in Alberta. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we live, work, and play, albeit virtually today. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples have called this land home. This is a land we now share with these people of the Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, as well as the Métis Region 3. The area where we are building a brand new innovation center located just east of downtown Calgary was once called Mokinsis, which means elbow in the Blackfoot language, and is where the Elbow River turns sharply north to meet the Bow River. This has been a meeting place for many peoples for thousands of years, and now we too are gathering here virtually and recognize this land as an important part of our shared history and the future for all of those who choose to live, work, and play here. All right, so to kick things off, I'll briefly introduce myself, and I thought my Twitter profile basically says it all. I've been living and working in and around Calgary's innovation ecosystem for the last 15 plus years. And over that time, I've worked in several startups in restaurant technology, music technology, fintech, and I'm currently the founder of a startup that plays in the prop tech space. All of that is in addition to my main role as an advisor with Platform Calgary, where I get to work with startup founders and I get to run great events like the one we're seeing here today. So Platform Calgary brings together the resources of Calgary's innovation ecosystem to help startups launch and grow at every stage of their journey. We focus on making all parts of Calgary's startup community better resourced, more connected, efficient, and prominent. And we've set a 10-year goal of 10xing the number of startups and tripling the size of Calgary's startup community. It's a big goal, but we believe it's an achievable one if we work together as a community to achieve it. And speaking of community, we are bringing together a community of over 80 partners, 17,000 humans in our new building, the Platform Innovation Center. So Calgary's new home for innovators located in East Village, just south of the new, I guess it's not so new anymore, Central Public Library. So within Platform, I had the opportunity earlier this year to actually help launch a pre-accelerator called Alberta Yield. It was a partnership with BioEnterprise and Tech Edmonton, which has now become Innovate Edmonton. And it was really focused around the agri-food and ag tech industry. I got to meet a lot of amazing companies that were building startups in the consumer packaged goods space and some even in the food and beverage space. And so I'm really excited to have this event as part of Innovation Week. We see a ton of interesting companies, interesting products that are being launched from right here in our province. And we're going to share some stories of technically 5, because our moderator is also an entrepreneur as well. So I think we're almost ready to go, but before I turn things over to our moderator, I just wanted to take care of a couple housekeeping items. So first, if everyone can please update their names in Zoom by using the 3 little dots to include their name and their company name if they have one. This helps us and the panelists have some context for who's in the room. Second, if I can ask everyone who can to please turn on their cameras. If there's one thing we've learned through COVID, it's no fun to stare at a screen full of black rectangles. So if you can turn it on, that would be great. Understand you may have little ones. You probably hear mine in the background. So you might not be able to right now, but if you can, we'd love to see your smiling faces. And lastly, if I can ask everybody to please stay on mute. If you do have questions for the panel, I'd ask that you please add them to the chat, and our moderator, Shanika, will get to them as we have time kind of at the end of the event here today. And there will be an opportunity, if there's follow-on questions later on, we may ask you to unmute and to follow up as well. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce Shanika, who is the founder of Bessie. Shanika, welcome. Thank you for moderating today.
Kevin, that was amazing. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanika, and like Kevin said, I'm one of the founders of an local e-commerce food startup called Bessie. But one of the great things that we've gotten to do over the last over 2 years, I think that over 2 years now, is get to work with some of the great brands that are on this panel today. So it's exciting for me to be able to bring everyone together. I would say over the last year, especially, I've been seeing more and more conversation around consumer packaged goods brands in our province, and I'm just excited to help spark more conversation. So we're going to start off with some pre-prepped questions. But for our panelists, just feel free to jump in wherever you want and whatever you want to elaborate on. We know that all of you just have such a wealth of knowledge. So I'm sure that whatever you have to share will help everyone. To start off with something a bit easy, I'm curious to know what inspired all of you to move into the food, working in food and beverage. Let's start with Eva.
My background is actually, I'm an oil and gas engineer by just definition, by title. I've actually kind of found my way in there. My background is actually in environmental engineering, but I couldn't find a job in environment when I moved to Calgary. So when 2015 hit, I was on mat leave with my third, and I had, been invited back to have the conversation about my projects, and they pink slipped me. And so all of my identity was wrapped up in who I was previously, the title, the role, the salary. And I slipped into a really, really dark place. But it was my husband who was taking a chocolatiering course. And he's like, should I still do this? Can we afford this? I was like, at least one of us should be happy. I'm just trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And so while I was comfort eating and recovering and trying to learn how to parent 3 kids, we launched this business. And it just kind of, transitioned into something that I didn't even dream of. And that's the beginning. And that's what the inspiration is behind our story.
I really, really love that, because I actually think the sort of sobering moment of, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Can also spark just something new and to move in a new direction of some sort. I relate very much to your story. Jamie, how about yourself?
My background was completely different from where I am now. So I started in food service, food and beverage. I was a chef for a long time. And then I just wanted to get into something. I turned 30 and I wanted to take some chances and risks and think outside the box. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And, a few years later, we've started and held 4 brands with my partner, who's actually also a chef background. So we know nothing about business at all, getting into this or anything that we would get into with manufacturing, with retail goods, any of that stuff. We've just been making this up all as we go. So
I just want to say you're doing it quite well, because I love Bow Valley barbecue. I have all of your sauces in my fridge right now. Christina, who's someone I know personally, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Apologies for my Australian accent. Please put any comments or any translations that you need in the chat box. I've got to say, COVID, Eva, once again, I also can relate. I lost my job due to COVID, and I'd been working on Exhale in the background for probably the last decade, and it'd been, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do this, I'll have enough money, I'll save up. And the job that I was in was the 4-year plan to save up and do the thing, and then COVID hit, and it was a push the button of screw it, I'm just going to do it. And I flipped my model upside down and finally turned my passion, my knowledge and study and travel of beer and into the model that I could do. And once it's that even when you were talking, it's that moment of reinvention of, okay, well what's next? What have I got? Where am I going? And what tools and what talent do I have to do the thing that I want to do, and how am I going to best maximize it? I did start my first business at 19. So I've had a lot of like failing practices in the back. I actually still have 2 that run kind of by themselves in the background, and I don't have to do too much to them or with them, and they're not really a money maker, but they're there. But I did do a lot of failing to practice to where I get here, to where I've gotten. And there's actually some people in this call here have been part of the journey to where I am today. So yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Emily, how about yourself?
Hi guys, I apologize if I cut in and out. I am in the middle of nowhere, New Brunswick, and the internet is shit. So good luck. How did I get into this? I got into this because I had a midlife crisis, and I someone said, if you get a normal job, you only get 2 weeks off a year. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm going to start my own thing and work even more, but at least I'm in control. So that's how Wild Tea kind of started.
I was gonna say, I feel like there's a common thread here of just being like, I don't want to do what's of the norm. What can I create for myself? Last but not least,
Yeah.
Ted.
Yeah, thanks, Shanika. Yeah, my career started as an engineer out of university, and worked 10 years corporately. Food and beverage wasn't on the radar whatsoever. I was working in renewable energy and water treatment. Had no idea that food and beverage was even a career choice. I kind of stumbled into it from a health perspective. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2005. Really struggled with that as a significant change to my life, and was really trying to understand what diets worked for me, what didn't. It was a very experimentary stage for me, and I think ultimately out of that, one of the big things was I discovered alcohol and me just didn't go together. And so I was a craft beer fan, and I was looking for alternatives. I felt like if I had a good alternative, I would be able to stay on the path I wanted to be on, and there weren't good alternatives on the market. So I first tried to tackle that problem with an import business and an online store around importing product from Europe, and that eventually pivoted into Partake Brewing and the creation of our own product and our own brand.
Brilliant. And honestly, Partake is taking the world. I feel like I see it everywhere. With COVID, I feel like for a lot of businesses, it's kind of changed or blown up different channels. So we're all used to going to brick and mortar, but I feel like direct to consumer just opened up so much more for brands. So my question for all of you is, are you doing omni-channel approaches? So brick and mortar and direct to consumer, maybe something else in between. And what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen in building out those channels? Ted, since you went last, we'll start with you first.
Sure. Yeah, we're an omni-channel business. As I said, I started in e-commerce, so we were probably the first beer company ever to launch in a purely D2C capacity. Being non-alcoholic was kind of a key to that decision. But that was the channel that allowed me to say, hey, look, if I make this product, no retailers want it at this point. No one believes the same long-term or has the same long-term vision I do for this category. So at least with my D2C channel, I can sell the product, and I have a very passionate fan base there. We've actually built our business very differently than traditional beer companies. We started online, then we went to mass retail, and now we're going into food service. Usually it works kind of the other way around. So, for us through COVID, having diversity in our channels was very important. We were in the liquor channel, grocery, natural. We were in the US market as well. We had D2C in both countries. So that was very important for us. I'd also say supply chain, having diversity of supply chain was very important. And we put an emphasis on trying to be as local as possible. We're a national brand. We're in both Canada and the US. We can't be hyper local, but to the extent we can localize our supply chain, we did. And I think that served us really well over COVID.
Yeah, I actually didn't even think about the supply chain, but you're totally spot on. Having that diversification can be such a strength. Jamie, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Ted's approach, we've got kind of a multi kind of task. So we started with food service when we started Bow Valley, just because we knew that food service would be quicker turnaround and reorders, whether it was customers rebuying, it would be more frequent with food service. And then we eventually built up to where we had enough reputation, I guess, to go into retail. It was really when I bought Boccolino, which was an existing refrigerated dressing brand, that we inherited a lot of the relationships to break Bow Valley into the retail sector. And then we've got, a number of challenges from each brand, but with Boccolino specifically, Boccolino is a refrigerated product. So that obviously creates a whole set of different problems and challenges for supply chain. And also, there's social media or online e-commerce is kind of non-existent unless you're going through third-party refrigerated channels. So each of our brands has a unique but multi-tiered approach to being, omni-channel, and we're trying to get our reach equally. But at the end of the day, groceries still are our bread and butter. So grocery retail.
I love that. Christina, how about yourself?
Yeah, under my current licensing, because essentially I have an agency license, and my license is the same as any other larger distributor, such as Christopher Stewart or PME, but I fall under the unique manufacturer agent license, which hopefully AGLC we're working with slowly to get some things changes there. Apart from, so I basically go through the central distribution warehouse of Connect for my main product, which is beer sales. Apart from that, the other stream of revenue and sales that we do is I have a full merchandise line, which is going bonkers right now. With all honesty, everything I do actually is drop shipped as well, so nothing gets ordered online. Most of it is eco-friendly wear as well, but we have a very unique audience that we connect to quite heavily, and people who really vote with their dollar. So it's actually kind of cool. I've been walking downtown. I've seen a couple of people with wearing some exhale gear and snowflake toques and whatever else. So it's mainly, yeah, just with licensing restrictions right now. I have been able to be creative with getting product to people in retail stores, and especially working very closely with the venues that have my beer either on tap or on menu in cans, who do some really great events and promotions with my brand, working towards the brick and mortar. Just once again have a few challenges and hurdles to jump there.
Yeah, I totally understand. I feel like as an entrepreneur, especially working in food, there's so much more regulation and things to think about than anyone ever thinks about. So it takes a lot longer than you think. Emily, with Wild Tea, what's your sort of approach to your channels?
So yeah, with our kombucha, I mean, we were only mainly conventional and natural in all of the grocery chains. And then when COVID hit, we didn't have an e-commerce website. And so that was really the kick in the ass that we needed to pivot and launch it. And so we did. And it was like, oh my God, people buy kombucha online. So that was kind of cool. The only challenge is that it is a heavy product to ship. And so, shipping to New Brunswick is very expensive. It costs the same amount to ship here as it does to Japan. So we're still trying to work on making e-commerce an item that is viable, at least nationally. And then again, with the US, same thing, it's expensive to ship. And then with the alcohol, our alcoholic line, that's a whole other can of worms. So, I mean, Christine has alluded to all of the joys that is AGLC licensing. But the one thing is at least she gets marked up under the craft brewer's license. So she only gets marked up a certain percentage. We get marked up, 10 times that. So it's ridiculous. But anyway.
Like I said, with Bessie, we sell Annex Ale as well as Polar Park, so breweries in Edmonton and Calgary, and we've even dealt with some interesting phone calls and emails with HLC. So I know that they're very challenging sometimes to manage. Eva, how about yourself? I know your chocolates are being shipped all over North America. So how are you managing everything?
Well, when COVID hit, like what had happened was we have a super high touch sales kind of gig because we have really, really beautiful, super labor intense product, and there's not a lot of margin there. So when COVID hit, there was no one showing up at the door, and we had to build out our e-commerce quickly. And thankfully, my business partner is also my husband, who's also the father of my children. He works in media, and so that's his background. So he's like, oh, I can just whip this together. So the kids would go to bed for 2 hours every night and power it out. And then next thing you know, we had an e-commerce platform, and we're ready to rock. And we decided to shut down our US distribution just for the fact that we needed to get everything under control and slowly work from the inside out, because we knew that the changes were coming. We just didn't know how long they would take. And, we're almost 2 years in, and not much has changed. But that being said, when you're going from a specific sales process into your different levels of marketing, and then also developing, corporate and wholesale streams, these are all different ways of handling your streams of income. And, like some other people, we had our bricks and mortar first. And it just so happened that we were, kind of shopping for, new space, because we had outgrown our little shop in Chinatown, which was only 1,000 square feet total. And we found an opportunity where we're able to move into a factory. And so we're upgraded to almost 7,000 square feet, and found ourselves a banging deal. And just kind of, it's all timing and just being ready for when that opportunity comes. Are you ready? It's like, well, holy crap, what do you do, right? So you either go for it or you hesitate and you don't. And I've learned that hesitation doesn't usually bring you awesome things. That hesitation is usually you talking yourself out of doing something extraordinary. So I went for it. And since then, it's just been amazing, because we've learned to, I'm a process systems and logistics nerd. And so all of the inefficiencies got ironed out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not like driving $10,000 worth of bonbons in my car with my hand over the passenger seat, trying to keep them from flying everywhere. I'm just taking them from from production to a storage room. We candy cut them out they go. And so, my people in retail are actually, they're actually doing the packaging, they're doing the fulfillment, they're doing shipping, and like everyone has a rotation instead of doing something for 8 hours. And so with a really, really small, teeny team, you can do extraordinary things if everyone is together and you're on the same page and you're able to lead people through. Because if they see your enthusiasm and they see that, you believe in yourself, then they're going to follow. And that's the best part about a small team.
You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but one of the questions that I've gotten over the last couple of years talking to food founders is how to build the right relationships, or even how to find the right people, whether it's to get into retailers or just to build your team. So how did you find the right people?
Like for me, it's not about, it is a little bit about skill sets. I mean, like it's chocolate. So in the kitchen, everything's very skilled. But when we bring people in, they're not coming in with a lot of experience. We hire them green and young. So that's how we deal with the kitchen. But the thing is I already have an existing team and they're kick-ass. What is the team going to be like if we bring you in? And so I'm looking for a growth mindset. I'm looking for someone who is humble enough to be okay with having, lots of criticism and, encouragement, but also for the fact that like you have to perform. And if you don't hit your metrics, there's the door. And if you come in and you don't have the right personality, the right fit, it's quick. They exit them as quickly and gracefully as we can. So it's really about timing and just really having the nerve, because when you're small, like I can't afford an HR professional. Right? I'm doing all the interviewing, I'm posting the ads, and I'm dealing with all the, all the paperwork that goes along with it. So we usually do these really, really long kind of auditions, I call them. So, about 6 months, that's your probation period. It's not 90 days, it's 6 months with us. And the reason why is because most, especially like I'm not young, like I'm in my late 40s. And so, most young folks can't hold it together for 100 days before they have some sort of conflict resolution problem. And I want to know how, if you're going to, go head to head with someone, how do you resolve that? How are you going to make it better? How do you be better? And it's somewhere around that 5th or 6th month that the wheels come off for most of the people that we hire. And so long probation, but there's not a lot of pressure. If I was in fintech or something that had a lot more, skill and, different levels of performance, you would be able to see that sooner. But from the retail fulfillment piece, you don't really see that early on.
Jamie, looking at Bow Valley, how have you connected with the right people to help grow your brand or to build your team?
We've been able to do all of the immediate, like hands-on stuff with a pretty small crew. Like we hired our 3rd person last year, and it's been almost 7 years. So the only way that's been possible though is by having great relationships and great partnerships with some really great companies. So we have, we work with District Capital, which is Arlene Dickinson's fund. We've got a lot of resourcing and networking through that. We work with some of the best co-packers across Canada for us to be able to become scalable, scale up and scale down with COVID. So we're just really fortunate to have really great relationships, and we kind of just rely on transparency. Like we don't have the HR headaches, but we definitely, for us to convince some of these larger entities to work with us and work with us in the early stages, you really have to be transparent in what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and kind of just put yourself out there to be willing to adapt and learn, but also be literally asking some of these larger companies and partnerships to take a chance on you first, and be willing to kind of be not the smartest guy in the room for a period of time, and be that sponge that's willing to kind of absorb as much and wear a lot of hats earlier than you plan to. But in the end, as long as you're being honest about it and really putting your best foot forward, I think people recognize that for the most part. Like Ava said, when you've got these young green people that are coming on and you're training them, they're super malleable. So as long as they're giving you that effort and you're giving them that transparency in return, I think you get some pretty good results.
Yeah, I actually think that's pretty like spot on to how we kind of have led things at Bessie as well. Ted, how about you over at Partake? I know that your team is it seems like there's always some sort of hiring going on. At least that's what I'm seeing on LinkedIn. So how have you built your team?
Yeah, we're about 25 people now, and we're looking probably to double our team in the next year. So if you guys know anyone, let me know. No, it's been a hard process. Like it seems you get to 10 people, then to 20, it's a big jump, right? Like you're doubling your team, and then we're trying to double it again. A lot of what Eva said, resonates with me. We hire a lot of young people that we think just have a lot of curiosity and energy, and try to mold them, but we don't do that without guidance. So, I think something that we've done well is that, and this is part of the, the self-reflection that and self-awareness that Jamie touched on, is that you need to know where your strengths are as an entrepreneur. And as your business grows, you actually, as the founder, become like, I'm not the expert in any of our functional areas anymore. We've got a VP of sales, marketing, operations, finance. So, I can bring all the pieces together. I have a high enough level of competency in all the areas, but we've hired consultants where we didn't have that in-house person, or it didn't make sense for us to hire a full-time CFO. For instance, we brought in a contract resource that could help us hire a junior person. They'd know what to look for in a financial accountant, and then they're able to mentor them for a while. And then, that person, can now do so much more within the organization. And then we did that in marketing. So, we took the approach of it's worth paying for expertise, and it's worth paying on the sales side, it's worth paying for connections. So even though we have a very, a competent sales team internally, we've used a broker in the Canadian context that was just able to, get us effectively from zero grocery distribution in 2019 to pretty much full national distribution in 2 years. So we pay for expertise, we pay for team development, and we pay for connections.
Christina, with you sort of growing your brand right now, how have you been able to align yourself with the right people, whoever the right people are? I realize I'm saying that, but I'm like, I'm not sure. It's
Yeah, it's pretty much a 95% one woman. No, I call it the superwoman shit show over here. I do have sweat equity partners that I brought in. So I did give away 6% of my company back in July. Part of that percentage went to the amazing human Eri Riot, who does the designing and has been with me from day one. And she does all the cans and is part of making my stupid merch ideas come to life. So she's the brains behind the operation of that. And so both, none of us, no one takes any paycheck from the business, and probably won't happen for another 6 to 12 months. Once again, just some other challenges going on in the background with growth and a system that we're in right now that doesn't necessarily want to help somebody like me. but I also the human that's done, you know, all my tap handles and has been a great friend and a pro bono sales rep. And then another friend of mine who once again has been a pro bono sales rep, going around and helping me with certain things and some deliveries, and fed me when I couldn't feed myself and watered me when I couldn't water myself either, which, as we all know, as entrepreneurs, can happen, or even to the point where he's come over and said, get in the shower. So I have found the right people in that I haven't been able to afford to pay people right now, but I also have an excellent bookkeeper and accountant who is also somebody that I speak to probably 2 or 3 times a week. So when I'm looking at those teams, and then the other people around me, there's actually 2 people on this call, Jeff Orr and Terry Andrew, who are wonderful friends. I get to walk with Terry most Fridays when I'm not dealing with some fire that I'm putting out. And Jeff Orr is also, once again, just been a great friend and business mind and helping with some back end systems work. And we're actually leaning on each other for a couple of things right now in the development of both our projects. So a team for me isn't necessarily the people that's paid, but it's also the collaborative community that you bring around, who, you know, when we come together, we're about joint success, to see each other grow. And then hopefully, you know, when we get to, you know, jump this kind of systemic financial hurdles that we're facing right now, and we can look in another, you know, hopefully 12 months time, because the growth with Excel has been unbelievable, with all honesty. We'll be able to look at bringing in the people who can, Jeff, don't put hearts in the chat, you'll make me cry. We'll be able to bring those other people in. But going back to what Ted said, I never think that I don't want to hire, I want to hire people who are smarter than me at the end of the day. I don't really, once again, I don't really know what I'm doing, even though I've kind of been doing this professionally for the last decade or so, but bringing in the people that bring different elements, and going once again back to what Eva said, how are you going to fit in with the team, and what part of the puzzle are you going to put into that? You know, what are we missing? And it's okay if we're different, and it's okay, you know, in that conflict resolution, are we going to do that with the compassion and with the vulnerability that we need to be able to do this to make this company grow?
Yeah, I think vulnerability is actually such a key piece that needs to come from leadership, and then also within your team members, right? If you don't have that, it's so hard to scale and to be like, hey, I'm the founder, but I don't know what's happening at all. And I want to be surrounded by everyone else that does. Emily, how about yourself? I know you do have a co-founder as well. So I'm curious how you two kind of came together to build Wild Tea, and how it was the right fit for both of you.
Yeah, so Bridget and I, in honesty, we met on a blind date. She had just quit her job as a health inspector with Alberta Health Services, and I had just finished my bobsled career, and someone said, hey, you should talk to this girl. She wants to start a career. And I had kind of just on a whim started this kombucha company, and then we met and boom, we fell in love. So, and then we met Jamie at the District Ventures Accelerator, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. So for us, I mean, everyone has said what the same thing that happened for us. So I don't want to speak too much because I think I'll lose people's attention span. But the bottom line is hire people. The most important thing is hire a good accountant. If you don't have good numbers, then everything else is shit. So have a good accountant, have a good lawyer, know what you are good at and know what you're not good at. Because if you can't admit your own weaknesses and you try to do it all, you spread yourself too thin. And I think the other thing is, alluding to what Christina's saying, like build a good community. And Calgary is small, so people will help you. They will lift you up if you ask for help, but you also, if you burn a bridge, they will not. And so, you know, handle yourself with respect and integrity, and it'll go a long way.
Yeah, kind of staying with you. One of the questions that we have as a team with Bessie, and that we're always thinking about, oh, Christina, your hand's up. I just realized that.
Okay, what Emily said, I have lawyers. So have good lawyers. I actually have 3 lawyers in my life. I could have 4, but have good lawyers, because I get a different perspective from each single one of them. Thankfully, they're all friends and they really love my beer. So they don't often charge me hourly unless it's a real job. But yeah, definitely have a couple of lawyers. That would be my big one. Because if I had have gone with one perspective only, I probably wouldn't have, I probably would have ended up in some little bit more of a hot water than what I should have, but I had multiple perspectives for some routes that I needed to take.
And I think it's also important you find someone who specializes in small business. We've been through 5 lawyers, and each one was like, oh, we can totally help you. And then no, they don't understand the scope. So same with accountants. You have to find someone that understands your business and how you write things off properly and specific to your needs, because everyone is different.
That's actually a very good point, because I do think a lot of, I mean, this is me personally speaking from experience, but a lot of law firms are like, oh yeah, we'll totally help startups. And then I'm like, oh, looking at how much you're willing to charge, I don't think you're going to be able to help my startup with that.
No, my lawyer is great. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, Ted, also with your hand up, feel free to all just jump in.
Yeah, I'd add to that, like, to Christina's point, like, I think you just need to have smart people around you that are willing to, be there to bounce things off of. Like, that's just incredibly important, whether they're lawyers or other professionals or have some background in business. I think for us as well, like we've gone through a lot of different service providers over time, and some, they're sometimes right for the stage of business you're at and maybe the next 12 months, but they're not a forever solution. And that it's a difficult thing because you build relationships, but I think our experience is that you have to be able to move on to that next level of help sometimes in various areas of your business, including professionals.
Yeah. Emily, what did you want to add? Or Eva, everyone.
I just wanted to say mentorship is huge. So, whether it's Ted or Christina or Eva, like, the community is small. We all are going through the same thing from a different angle. So reach out and network. And I think that's the one thing about Calgary specifically, but just entrepreneurship. You need to have someone who's completely smarter than you, who's a mentor that can kind of help guide you. Maybe that is Arlene Dickinson, but you also need peers who are in the trenches, who can come at it from different angles and help you make those decisions. And there is no wrong decision, but if you're going to spend money, make sure you've come at it from every angle, because you don't want to be like me, where you spend, too much money on something that was a poor decision.
Going back to accountants and lawyers, I audition them too, and I go through them. It seems like socks and Kleenex. I just, I really communicate effectively. The question is, through your communications, is what you're saying actually landing to the person on the other side of the phone, the screen, the talk, the interview? And, if they're not performing in the way that you need them to, and they're not giving you the feedback that you need, and you're not learning anything, it's time to move on.
I love this mentality of just like, if it's not it, just, it's fine. With peace and love, we'll let this relationship go. One of the questions that pops up for Bessie, my team at Bessie, and also that I see in the food space, and what I'm going to bring to all of you, Emily, and of course I'm going to ask all of you, but what do you think is the biggest opportunity we have in the food and beverage space here in Alberta? No pressure.
Oh God. I mean, we have a captive audience, and we have loyalty. And, I personally, when you're trying to sell kombucha, even to Ontario or BC, it's been such a challenge, because people are very, I'm only going to support Vancouver. I'm only going to support Ontario. So in Alberta, if you can attend those markets, if you can be part of those festivals, if you can show that you have community involvement, the people will be there for you and they will buy your product. And that's the one thing, like, now that I'm in New Brunswick, like, there's just not the people and there isn't the desire, but Calgary has that. And so that's really awesome that, you just have to be able to connect to these people. And whether it is through social media platforms or it is through joining like different groups, being part of boards, I think you just have to try to hit things from a multifaceted approach and be a transformational leader, as they say, and your business will do okay. Like, I just finished my MBA. I'm all full of words and quirks. So
I love the air quotes that you added there.
Yeah, I just
Jamie,
took a class.
Jamie, what do you think is the biggest opportunity that we have here in the food and beverage space?
I think sometimes competition can be a big threat, but it can also be the best thing around us. I mean, it pushes you, it makes you try to stand out, and it becomes this melting pot. Like in 2012, when I was looking at getting into what it would mean to be a manufacturer, you know, taking products from restaurant recipes to formulated recipes, there was really not a lot of networking to talk to at the time. Like it was few and far between, and in the last 10 years, it's just exploded. But like the incubators and the cohorts and what we're doing right now, it pushes you to push the trends and hone in on what your niche is a lot quicker, and there's a lot more pressure. And I think, you know, like the cliche, like there's things that are really worth having are built better under pressure than they are you know, out of, you know, spare time and leisure. Like when you're really pushed to it and you really have to stand out and you really have to get somewhere, the pressure of having this much competition and this much networking and inspiration around us, I think, has been super helpful. And watching Calgary, especially, in Edmonton too, but just the networking in Calgary, like I've known Ava and Emily and been inspired by those guys, and it's great to start to meet everyone else who's on the call today. And I know, I'm sure there's a lot of others that I'm familiar with, but there's so many takeaways from everybody at different stages of where they were at or where they are now and where they're going. And you can see yourself in these early stages. You can also see yourself in where you're trying to get with some of these more successful, but it's always great to hear like the failures, like the horror stories of, you know, like Emily touched on a minute ago, stage where you maybe lost some money because you made a bad decision, but you're not the only one that can learn from that. Like we can all learn from that too. It's the best lessons are what not to do, not what to do, because that's the hard part.
Ted, any thoughts on what you think our biggest opportunity is?
Yeah, I'll you know, I think Jamie's right. Like there's a strong community here. I moved to Alberta in 2018. So I've been here less than 4 years, and more than half the time, unfortunately, has been during COVID. So not your normal experience moving to a new place. But, you know, I'd say there are lots of great food and beverage innovators, entrepreneurs, business owners here in Alberta. But, you know, going back to the question on what's the opportunity, I think there's a huge opportunity for coordination that, you know, I haven't seen in the industry yet. Like there's not, when I came here, it's like, how do I get plugged into food and beverage, what's going on here? And I didn't find a source for that was easy access. You know, I participated in ATBX. That was a great program, easy to come into and get to know people. I built my own network, but I think there's a leadership role for some organization, and maybe it's Platform Calgary or some offshoot that can take more of a leadership role within the sector.
Agreed. Just a spin off of what Ted has to say, like, you know, all the accelerators and all the incubators that I was in, they were all tech incubators, right? Like, you know, sales, but, you know, 99% of the people that are in there, you know, tech, you know, they're, you know, doing enterprise software and trying to get their products into large companies. And so, you know, I was the chocolate lady, you know, no one even knew my name. They're like, oh, you sell chocolate, isn't that cute, right? And so, you know, you just kind of have to, you know, okay, I'm going to take the lessons and apply it, because the reality is when you have those high level kind of topics, or the way that you would execute on, you know, enterprise sales, you would actually apply that, you know, to my small itty bitty, you know, selling a bonbon. So it's fascinating what you can actually do with that. Where I see the opportunities in Alberta are in collaboration. For a long time, especially in the food space, like people, you know, stood shoulder to shoulder, and they don't have a tendency to let people in. And so, you know, I don't have time for that type of behavior. And I finally got to the place in the confidence in myself where I don't play that type of ridiculous, you know, politics anymore. I don't have to do all that backstabby, weird corporate stuff in order to get my point across. And so now, like, you know, we're working with other chocolatiers internationally, having discussions about, So what are you doing in your process? How do you maximize efficiencies? What are you doing in your operations? What was the one thing that made the difference for you? Oh, you got a new piece of equipment. How is that working? I have a different piece of equipment. Let's compare. Who are you using for, shipping? What type of deal did you get? What's your average cost on those types of things? Having those types of conversations with other entrepreneurs to be able to kind of, increase your margins is important, because in food and bev, the margins aren't fat. They're just not. And when you're dealing with chocolate, they're even less fat than that. Another thing that I'm really seeing is because Alberta has such a deep and wide tech kind of industry, there's so much talent here. I'm just going to be like keeping my eye on anything that can help me with supply chain. I'm not like the courier companies getting deliveries out. Like, that's important to me. So if I can, I want to know who's first in line to doing drone technology. I want to know who's doing, who's going to be able to give me better fees on transactions. I want to know who I can borrow more capital from related to fintech, because all of the traditional ways that we're doing business, they're really not working for me. I just, I'm just really tech forward, and I'm really looking forward to being able to really disrupt the industry in all the ways.
I love that. Christina, I know I was going to say, I feel like we should mic drop. We should all leave. That was great. And on that, let's do it. Let's disrupt it all.
I'm going to exit stage left after that, Eva.
Christina, how about, what opportunity, or what do you see as the biggest opportunity for us in food and beverage?
I'm going to speak from a very personal and anecdotal perspective, and just because of the branding take that I've gone down the road with Exhale. We are in a very interesting social and political place within our current dynamics, and especially within Alberta. We're seeing a big shift and change happen, where people like myself and Shanika and Eva and Emily get to sit down at the table and hold our spots and make our voices heard and not take shit and not get pushed out the door. So I think that there is a definite opportunity there for those of us who traditionally haven't had spaces made for us. As far as the beer industry, I mean, I can call up the owner of Origin or Red Shed Malting and have the bags ready for me to pick up in my car and just drive out and, grab a couple of bags, or they just come in with their truck and drop it off for me either at my house or down at the breweries. I think that's a very special and unique opportunity that we have as people who use grain, that we have the direct bat line to these people who, oh my God, shit, I don't have 2 bags of this. All of a sudden I can literally go to the source, or the source will come directly to me. But also I think that there's opportunity in being part of now Calgary is apparently one of the most livable cities, is the most livable city in Canada, just voted. We just outranked Vancouver and Toronto. And part of that is that we've still got an affordable place to live in. We all know BC means bring cash. And Toronto, I worked as a sales and marketing manager for a national company, and I worked for them as part of the Alberta management, head of management there. And when I would look at Toronto and BC numbers and be able to do market comparisons, I know that it's hard out here right now, but we also have a much more economically sustainable place as individuals. Even though we do see growing equality, it is not happening as bad as what is happening in BC and Toronto. That's one of the reasons why we've become one of the most livable city in Canada. Can we keep that going? I hope so. Can we start to really diversify? I hope so as well, and keep that going. I think that's our and the diversification of our province and this kind of crack that we're seeing right now. I think that's where all the entrepreneurship is going to come out. That's where the disruption is really, really happening. And that's as coming back to what Eva said, that's a big opportunity.
You kind of alluded to this, but one of the questions that I think that a lot of founders, at least in my experience, don't talk about is Oh, Emily put something in the chat about her dad buying a place on the ocean. We need to know who Emily's dad. You need to give us the hookup. Like, that sounds great still. But one of the conversations that I feel like a lot of founders don't have is just about how are you funding your business, and even the challenges tied to raising capital or whether to take debt financing. So I'm hoping that you all can shed some light on that, because I know as an entrepreneur, I was completely naive to it all. And if we want to start, Christina, the highlights on you. So we'll start with you. How has it been trying to fund your business, looking at everything from, like I said, raising external capital to debt financing to grants? Like, what's it been like?
I only cry like 3 times a week now. I have a therapist too, so that's fine. But I personally funded this myself from my meager life savings and some money that thankfully I come from a working class white family on colonial grounds in Australia that were able to lend me some money. I haven't been able to secure external financing right now because I'm only just over a year old. A lot of grants won't touch you until you have a history of financials. So I'm just kind of going through the process right now. I'm looking at bringing in some grant professionals because, as I said, I run 95% of this business solo and I don't have the time or the expertise. Once again, I'm not the expert at writing grants, so I don't have the expertise. So looking at bringing in some people, external companies and groups to do that. I'm in a very interesting and unique position where I'm an immigrant, so I don't have a ton of equity. I'm solo immigrant, so I don't have family here that can go guarantor on a loan. I don't have a partner, so I'm single. There's no secondary income at home, which is also a question they ask you. And I lost my job due to COVID. So I essentially, according to modern day and capitalist standards, I live under the poverty line. I have a part-time job that I work, and I do some contract business as well through one of my other companies. So yeah, traditionally banks, I've been turned away from a number of banks. And we've got this growing inequality. You know, we already see women coming from less from economically less wealthy or secure jobs with less benefits. We also lost $8 billion globally as from the global economic and labor market, and 5% of the world's jobs compared to the 3%. So we need our systems to change, and we need our systems to come up with some new measuring sticks, because we're going to see those gaps grow, you know, larger and larger. And, you know, I'm thankful I'm white and I speak English and I'm educated. So if it's hard for me, imagine what it's like out there for a lot of other people. So one of the things that XAL is going to be trying to do, and part of our brand, is making awareness around this. And part of, as we get bigger, we make sure that these communities are the people that are part of our communities, and we help grow that and be voices and advocates around making sure that there is opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. Eva, how have you funded everything? What's your experience been?
Well, I mean, I come from an immigrant background. My parents aren't rich. Like, you know, like I paid for my own ticket the whole way. And so when it came time to go to work, I literally saved every penny I had and I tucked it away. And then the rainy day came and my husband was freaking out. And I was like, what are you panicking about? Because I've got a nest egg. He's like, you have a nest egg? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, how come I don't know about the next egg? I was like, because it's my nest egg. It's not your nest egg. It's my nest egg. And so pretty much the whole thing is wrapped up in the chocolate lab. But like, you know, I'm running the entire company on $7,000 worth of Visa credit card. I'm chained to my desk doing bank transfer after bank transfer, you know, and, you know, okay, you can apply for a little bit more, and then you give them all, you know, no, we decided that we're not going to give you any. And they don't tell you what the hurdles are. You're just jumping and running, and you're doing a little dance for them. And my whole point is that if you're going to make me dance, the least you could do is throw me some bananas, right? So that's where my frustration is. And, eventually, you don't tell one bank one thing, but you do, but you go and apply, and sometimes you'll get a little bit if you build a relationship with someone. And I just got tired of being so, like having to manipulate the situation. And it wasn't until this whole e-commerce thing kind of pivoted for us that I turned to ClearBank. And so our first, little chunk was, 10 grand. And the next one was a little more. And so I think, all said and done, like, they've given me plenty to manage. But the rest of the traditional banking system is something that I'm just so disenfranchised with. I'm so disenchanted and disappointed with what you have to do to demonstrate that you need money. I think one of the best analogies that I've ever been told about, getting bank money was, it's kind of like someone saying, like, when you have the baby, I will help. But they really step in when the kid turns 14. All the hard work is done. The child is already successful. You can tell what their strength, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then they take all the credit. So that's kind of why that everything that's alternative, I will definitely listen to, and I'm not going to traditional conventional banking for the most part any longer.
There's a round of applause from Christina. No one else is seeing that. Jamie, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think like to everything Ava just said, it's in our sector, like food and beverage and CPG, there's not a lot of traditional lenders lining up to hand us money, and at least not until a lot of the work's done. So I don't know, I've been a bit of a poster child for a lot of these small startup grants, whether it was Growing Forward through Alberta Agriculture. We got into pilot processing. That's how I got to take that step from making like, mason jar sauces for farmers markets to learning a little bit of the food science, but it's all step-by-step stuff along the way. And, there was a point in time where $20,000 seemed like it was, the end all be all, and those thresholds and those plateaus change. And so you're always constantly reevaluating the perspective of what the true value of the money you need is and where that's going to get you and where you want to go. And I think, like, I learned a lot when I bought Boccolino Fine Foods. So I bought Boccolino from an owner-operator couple that were restaurant owners, and they had penny pinched every dollar they ever made, and literally kept their hands on everything, did everything themselves, and they made a good living for it. But for us, and for what Chris and I wanted to do, we wanted to go beyond ourselves, and we wanted to. So it was a completely different model and a completely much scarier approach to taking a mom and pop owner operator model to getting into talking to VCs and talking about, wanting to get and how much money it would take to get there. So one of the best analogies I've heard and put into perspective is, and it's a question that I still constantly ask myself, and for different reasons at different stages, but do you want to have 100% of something small and the small pond thing, or do you want to own a small piece of something much larger than yourself? And I think that's something we all probably struggle with at some point when talking about how much money we're going to need, because it's really, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to be? And I remember in 2012, I was doing the self-employment program with Community Futures, and they asked what your big, hairy, audacious goal was. And I remember saying I wanted our brand to be a household name. And I realized by saying that I wanted it to be larger than myself. So at this stage where we're at now, I'm happy to say that, I'm proud of hopefully creating something that eventually becomes much larger than myself.
I love that. I think you're on your way. Ted, how has your experience been?
Yeah, so early days, similar to a lot of entrepreneurs, no proof of concept, using my own savings, some equity on my house, having those awkward conversations with my wife about, are we ever going to get paid back? Will you ever get a salary? And, we were fortunate that we got to a point where, hey, we got lots of traction with the product. The money I was having to put into the business was really going to support inventory that was selling. So that was a good problem to have. We got a lot of grants. We were very good at writing grant applications and getting grant money that was available, understanding the cycle of grants. I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably just, they at least in my network, people, are very aware of the funding deadlines and trying to get ahead of grant writing, because you're so busy with the day to day that it gets down to the last minute, and it's, you can't write a good grant application the night before it's due. So there's some planning involved in that. So, I try to help other entrepreneurs just get ahead on some of those things. And then, we got to the point where, we had enough success. We went out and raised equity money, and we raised it primarily from US investors because we had a view to take our business to the US. And we're currently involved in some other discussions to raise more money. And I think, to Jamie's point, like there's a time when you can say, hey, something's going right here. I can run this as a good Canadian business, or I can kind of try and swing for the fences. And I think we're gonna try and swing for the fences. And I think for our industry, it doesn't get the visibility that tech does from a financial backing perspective, but I would guess that we'd be probably the second best funded company in Calgary in a startup environment, including tech companies.
I actually, I think I would agree with that. If the Globe and Mail article is the one that I need to refer from, I think you're spot on. Emily, I know that you have a call coming up, so I want to make sure I got this question asked from you. But how has your experience been funding your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line is you have to decide, what is your definition of success? Do you want to be a farmer's market stall where you have all of the margins, but you give up every weekend for the next X many years? Or do you want to be a national, international brand and give up your company, but then be a global name? So I think it really starts with, what is your definition? And then making a smart roadmap to get there. Again, I have made all of the wrong financial decisions, and I think there is pros and cons to going to the banks first. There's pros and cons of going to VCs first. There's pros and cons of having a business partner. And now we're at a place where we need to get to the next stage, and COVID annihilated our cash flow. And so we're in this vicious cycle where we can't pay to enter new markets. We can't pay to get into new listings because we just don't have the cash flow to pay for those listing fees. And no one will give us any money because on paper, we look like a hot mess. Jesus Christ, sorry. I just dropped you. You still there?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're still here. Don't worry.
Sorry, I just swore. I'm sorry. So I think it's,
Okay.
again, it's being strategic. And I think, like, for us, the biggest thing is just having to think about things strategically and about where we want to get to and how we're going to get there, and finding partners and people who can help make the decision process a lot easier, using business coaches, using, the different people in the community to bounce ideas from. And then hopefully one day we get to a place like Ted where, we're trying to raise, millions of dollars and whatnot. But I think that the bottom line is you have to look at things in terms of incremental steps. You can't look at the whole staircase. You don't go from squatting, nothing to 4 plates. You have to add a little bit each day. And so that's the manageable way to make things more tangible and have less nervous breakdowns and crying. So
I really love the honesty here on just the crying. Like, I think that, all founders need therapists. I will say that we need to make mental health specifically for founders more accessible. This is a question that I've gotten from some customers on the Bestie side. And I'm curious because as much as I'm in food and beverage, I feel like what we do at Bestie is a little bit different. What are some trends that you're seeing in the spaces? We get asked all the time about eco-friendly packaging. And I quite literally had a customer flip me an article about something that was happening in Sweden. And I was like, I don't have the power to make this like regulatory compliant here. Like, I don't know how to make that work, but like, I'm glad you sent this my way. So I'm curious if there is anything like that happening in the space, or anything that you're have an eye on, even if you're not moving into that yourself. Eva, would you like to start?
Yeah, like I'm a packaging nut. Like before I was an engineer, I was a makeup artist, and we all know that that's an entire different planet when it comes to packaging. And so when I'm working with my husband, who's a graphics guy, we come up with all sorts of extraordinary concepts, and then the naming of the stuff, and then it's also, like, what materials are you going to use? And so we decided straight off the hop that, you know, we were going to make, you know, we're going to bring in a friend who's going to be, you know, who we've worked with previously, who's just, you know, award-winning design, right? So we won packaging designs awards, you know, internationally for our packaging and our branding. You know, we decided to go with paper. So this is our pink box, you know, with a, you know, and, you know, I engineered this, I designed this, you know, it's all, you know, everyone copies us, you know, I'm getting Chinese companies like, hey, would you like a chocolate box that looks like the chocolate lab? To the chocolate lab. It's hilarious, right? And so, you know, the reality is that if you have a concept, it can be done. The question is, do you have the network? Do you have the people? Do you have the skill sets to actually create the vision and make it come to life? There's another platform Calgary mentor that I had in the business side of things, and he had somebody in his life who was, you know, I think it was an ingredient like food engineer. And it's like, if you ever need to connect, you know, it's like, okay, like let's have a conversation. But like there's all sorts of really cool Canadian companies that do really innovative packaging. This is our last like round most recently of some of the things that we're doing. And like, you know, this is recyclable and it's compostable and it's sustainable and it's sexy, right? So you have to figure out what you can afford, what you can do, and, you know, and go for it, you know, but it's an investment. And that's part of the cash flow issues that Emily was talking about. Because, you know, it's so much money up front. And with supply chain issues that we have, all of us, you know, especially across Canada, it's unpredictable. This pandemic has really, really messed things up. And then on top of that, all the crazy flooding that's happened in BC. So trying to get freight over to us in Calgary has been really, really painful. So if you've got boxes or bags or stickers that are coming from there, you have to either wait or afford to air freight. And so, you know, all the things that are, you know, ecologically happy and stuff like that, like, you know, go for it. Like, I'm just surprised that we have options that aren't.
That's a very good point. Jamie, how about yourself? What are some innovative things in this space that maybe you have your eye on or that you've implemented at your business?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything Ava just said, and I think we all struggle with trying to be all of those things. So it's like, that's the thing with whatever your resources are, whatever your direction is, you have to find like hone in points at different stages of what packaging makes sense for me right now, what design, like I'm sure we can all, you know, articulate all these great ideas that we'd have for our brands, but it's the timing and the staging of when things are great. Like if I look back at our very first rendition of our packaging, it looks like absolute garbage in my opinion now, but at the time it was such a, you know, the initial concept of it and just seeing something come to life was so cool. And you couldn't have told me at the time that it was, you know, dog shit. Everyone was like, well, you know, maybe it could be a little better. I'm like, no, this is great. Trust me, this is great. But ultimately, like aside from packaging and stuff, it's the trends that we want to see, like, you know, natural ingredients, a lot of plant-based stuff, the non-GMO, the gluten-free, things that everybody should be conscious of. But what we're happy about, what we're seeing is our customers, the grocers and things like that. It's not just, you're not just stigmatizing your product anymore for being gluten-free or non-GMO. Like there's a lot of stuff, I think, in the first 20 years of those dietary claims that are first to market where they don't necessarily taste like what you want them to taste like. They don't. And we're still like, we're happy to be able to navigate through those claims and be all about that stuff, but it's still all about flavor and quality. Like at the end of the day, we want our stuff to taste good above all of the other stuff. We're not making gluten-free sauce so that it can be gluten-free first, or non-GMO salsa because that's the driving principle. It's just, that happens to be what we can include in part of our branding and our concept and our identity, but it's got to be flavor. And thankfully, a lot of, I think the consumers have become much more sophisticated in the last 10 years. Like you see some of the stuff that Ava's doing with their chocolate, like it doesn't even look like food. It looks like science. It's crazy. It's mind blowing. And I think you have to, customers, you know, we've Food Network and all these things that have put food, and everybody's a foodie nowadays. That's a good thing because it allows us to push the barriers and the threshold of what we're doing, especially with the beverages and stuff like that. Like that's just exploding nowadays, and it's exciting. And that goes back to the first couple of questions. When you start getting into that heavy competition and more amazing products on the market, it makes you go that much harder to try and put something out there that meets and checks all those boxes. And it's it's harder every year to do so because there are such great products out there. So
I don't know if Jamie's frozen on your screen too, but he is frozen on mine. I'm sure whatever he's saying. I think, oh, you're back. Yay. We
I
lost
don't know where that left off, but I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. Emily, what kind of trends are you seeing in the space, whether it's from flavor, like I said, or it can be like eco-friendly packaging or anything else?
Sure. And then this will be my last, and then I have to go, guys. I apologize. So just putting out some fires.
Totally okay.
So, I mean,
Get
obviously,
it.
environment, again, what Jamie's saying, like where you're at when you're first starting out, can you afford to order a can of like sustainable packaging? No, you can't. But sustainability is really important. And I think also trying to source things as close to home as possible. I think we need to think more consciously about not trying to order our things from China or wherever. And then for me, specifically in the beverage space, functionality. So people want adaptogens, they want probiotics, they want low sugar, they want things that have multiple benefits. And so I think it's not just about water anymore. Now it's water that has probiotics. Now it's water that has ashwagandha that's going to calm you down. And if COVID did anything, it's really making us be mindful. And I think the third thing is about connecting. And so there's a lot of a push now to have products come back to like where it's the story and back to the land, and trying to integrate, like, here's the QR code to find out about our founders so that you feel like you can relate to this founder. And so to really like build a story, and that's something that Midday Squares does really well. I mean, I hate TikTok, but if you can use these social platforms to your benefit and make your story your platform, it is to your benefit. I mean, yeah. And that is all I have to say. Thank you very much for this time. And also, sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing. Ted's putting up some links for grants,
Yeah,
but if anyone has questions about, I mean, between myself, I'm sure, and everyone on this panel, we know almost every grant available in the world. So if anyone has any questions, they can reach out. And the same with LinkedIn, feel free to add me and I'll try to help you in any way possible. So that's business, right? If you don't lift each other up, then what's the point of doing business? So
I hope that you are all adding them on LinkedIn as we speak, because that free invitation is so helpful for any small business owner. Christina, what kind of trends are you seeing? I actually want to pick on you specifically because there's some questions here, but just about like how you're integrating social consciousness into your product. And because I feel like that's a trend, but it's not really, because it's just so important for us as a society.
And I guess you have a little bit more insight into some of the programming and shit that I do in the background. So the big old hippie side of me is about sustainability, and thinking about what does it look like down the road, and how are we stopping things like the massive BC floods that are happening in BC right now, and a lot of that is along heavily logged areas. How are we holding our logging companies accountable, but also how are we holding ourselves accountable as people who use packaging in what we do? So one of the things that I've actually done is I've signed up with Canopy Planet as a Pack for Good policy holder. So over the next 3 years, I'm actually auditing every single one of my suppliers on where they resource their material, how they send that to me. So what materials are they sending it to me? And are there any endangered and or ancient forest products in that? As an addendum to that, I'm also working on eliminating plastics, all single-use plastics. Slowly, once again, going back to what Jamie said about doing what you can do within your financial capability, is definitely a hot point. Doing the best to do that, but I'm actually working through Canopy Planet with a team of people in packaging on being able to create closed loop cycled packaging. So what that is using barley straw waste and spent grain as partial packaging materials to go into labeling and boxing. So the shit that I'm putting into my beer is also the shit that I'm using to contain my beer and display my beer. So that's still process. We're probably looking at a prototype, hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months. But making headways around that. And I think one of the things that we need to be doing as people who contribute to consumerism is having those conversations within our space. So when, on every single one of my packaging at the bottom of my can is, provocative beer for conscious thinkers and drinkers, I want people to vote with their dollar. As I said, I'm stepping away from materials that don't fully biodegrade, materials that aren't recyclable, single-use plastics, materials that are ethically and sustainably sourced. So going through Stella and Stanley product, using recycled polyesters for clothing, even though polyester fibers don't actually 100% break down, but we're working on that. So having those conscious conversations within the spaces that we do, because we contribute to consumerism. So we're pushing for people to buy our products, but how are we pushing people to buy our products and do it right? So when you go to my Instagram, you'll see on there merch and policy and Canopy Planet policy and I'll go to my link tree and you can actually go directly to that policy, and I post about it. And I haven't talked much about the packaging side of things because we're still in very much early development stages and just kind of looking for some lab space now. I'm kind of looking for a bit more funding behind that, to be honest. So I think, having those conversations as consumer heavy goods with other entrepreneurs, like holding each other accountable as far as our recyclability and sustainability is huge. I definitely know that when I move into my own space, I'm looking, at geothermic and carbon capture kind of stuff, and how do I reduce my impact, or even how do I try and reverse some of that impact that we're making?
So we actually have a few questions. So Ted, I'm sorry, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on trends, but I actually think some of these can be better answered. So Andy sent me directly a question that says, how is retail traded in Calgary, Alberta? Is it diversified in terms of ethnic stores? What's the variety of stores compared to Vancouver or Toronto? I'm not sure who can answer that, but whoever can, please jump in, and then we'll go on to Candy's question next. Also, hi, Candy. Hope you're doing well.
I can jump in. Like I just came back from California this morning, and my team's awesome. They made me go and look at like 50 stores, and there's such a diversity of retail in the US compared to Canada. I think, Calgary is indicative of Canada in general. Like there's a lot of control in the marketplace with Sobeys, Safeway, and Loblaws, but there's also some strong natural channel players and ethnic grocers as well. So, I think depending on what type of product you're launching, I think there's still a lot of avenues to start small and grow and work with like individual store proprietors. But it's not quite the same in the US. And I think that's partially why you're seeing more innovation in the US. Like the entire stores that I'm going into, it's not big CPG brands. There's some of them still there, but the stores are centered around innovation and, companies that have purpose, whether that purpose is around packaging, whether it's around new flavors, new ingredients, all kinds of things. So, I think the retail landscape, there's some vibrancy to it, but, I think we have a long way to go to bring other retailers and diversity into the mix, not just in Calgary, but on a national level.
Does anyone want to add to that before we go to Candy's question?
I just think that like the online presence of how small the world is now is going to diversify the bricks and mortar as well. And you're kind of starting to see that in Calgary, but yeah, I agree with everything Ted's saying as well.
I'd add to what I said, like, the larger retailers, some of them are doing a good job of trying to bring in like early stage brands. So it's, there's a recognition of market power as well, and trying trying to still be a good partner there. So I don't want to leave that unsaid, because I think there are some good programs from the large retailers that are meant to help some of these brands, establish themselves from a relatively low early stage.
Just jumping to Candy's question, everyone go check out Parch Tea. I love that she threw her handle in the chat. They're looking to do more e-commerce for a tea product. Do you have any tips on shipping, delivery, logistics for consumer packaged goods that is typically taking up quite a bit of weight and space for the product price?
I'll jump in on this one. Ultimately, there's been a huge shift in how people warehouse product before they get it out there. Previously, we tried to, most entrepreneurs try to keep as little inventory as they can in their warehouse, because if it's sitting on your shelf and you have tons of packaging and all those other things, then that's taking up space and money. So usually in the very beginning, you're kind of just buying what you need. The problem now is that with supply chain being what it is, now you have to buy in volume, right? All the boxes, all that type of stuff, and then all the packaging and getting everything into your packages, and then actually trying to get the right relationships with service providers related to shipping. And so it really depends on your product. How is it handled? Is it precious? Is it breakable? It's tea. So for the most part, it can handle a good Canada Post shipping experience, right? So you're not going to probably be using couriers and those types of high priced delivery services, but shop around, get yourself a small small business account with all of the service providers and see what happens. In the beginning for us, we relied, really, really heavily on Canada Post. Now we no longer rely heavily on Canada Post since the pandemic. And now since the whole BC, highway collapse. And so, always have 2 or 3 service providers that you can rely on in case something changes. I'm really understanding that you can't rely on one thing for one particular type of service in your company. You always have to have a backup, and sometimes 2 or 3.
Ted had a question. Does it freeze? Candy, I'm not sure. I know your company, but I don't know that.
I just asked that because I've shipped beverages for over 10 years, and shipping something in Western Canada in the middle of winter, particularly if it's glass bottles, is not a good experience for your customers.
Oh, I don't even think about that, but she says, yes, it does. So does anyone else have anything to add for her question tied to shipping, delivery, logistics, consumer packaged goods? Because if not, I would love to just say thank you and close it, but does anyone else have anything to add? No. All right, that's totally fine. I just wanted to say thank you so much on behalf of me, of course, but also just all of the food entrepreneurs in the city. All of you are innovating in so many different ways, and it's so important to have these conversations because guess what? It's not happening a lot. I think we can sometimes feel like we're on an island. So I just want to also thank Ted for kind of bringing this idea up, and then KD, Kevin, for pulling me in to moderate. For everyone that's still on, and we are going to send a recording out for the panel that we just had, so you can always watch it back. I would definitely take up Emily's offer on messaging her on LinkedIn. I think we need, once again, that community to grow. And then what other thing am I supposed to plug? Platform Calgary, right? Okay, there is a pre-accelerator program that's Canada-wide, Alberta-wide. It's open to everyone. It's pan-provincial. There we go. So please apply to that. If you want more information, you can head to platformcalgary.com. If you scan the QR code, you can sign up for the newsletter. That's the best way to know about events, programs. There's a lot of change happening in the space right now. You'll also be the first to know about the Innovation Center, which should be opening early next year. So thank you again, Jamie, Christina, Ted, Eva. This was so great. Thank you for being so candid. And I'm sure we'll all connect again because I don't think this will be the last time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you, Shanika, for doing a great job moderating today, asking some great questions, and just for everybody on the panel, and including Shanika, just being so honest and transparent about your experiences. I think that's what builds community, sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just really appreciate you all sharing that today with the group that we had. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate
everyone.
it. I'll reach out directly. Thank you.